Welcome to the Bitcoin Source, your hub for exploring insights into the world of Bitcoin and blockchain technology. Today, we have a seasoned executive in the digital asset space, the COO of Chamber of Digital Commerce, Alex Chiznik. With a wealth of experience from Okcoin to Microsoft, Alex brings a deep understanding of the industry's ecosystem. Let's dive into his journey and learn from his wealth of knowledge. Welcome, Alex.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes. So, Alex, I want to kick this off with the first question I have for you, which is given your diverse experience, could you walk us through your personal journey into the world of digital assets and what drew you into Bitcoin in particular?
Yeah, this is the must question for all the podcasts. So look, I got in 2016. I was at Microsoft at the time, and incidentally, I have a grandfather who we emigrated from the Soviet Union from Ukraine. I'm Ukrainian by origin, and he was an engineer there. And at like 90 years old or 89 years old at the time, he was like, there's this thing called Bitcoin. And I was like, okay, grandpa, we have money. And he's like, yeah, you should look into this, some digital coin. And then about 6 months later, when I was at Microsoft, we were studying emerging technologies and things on the horizon. I looked at blockchain, and this was just to anchor folks. Uh, this was when Bitcoin was at about $700 and Ethereum was at 5 to 10. So this is very early. And once I dove in, you go down the rabbit hole. I started studying it more and more and understood, well, blockchains, and then invested a little bit. And this was right during the ramp up of 2017. So it was exciting. And then, but once you study it more and you understand the power it gives, you kind of fall into it. And I'll come back to this in a second. I was about to go full time. I had a hiatus because Steve Ballmer, the former CEO of Microsoft, and Mark Penn, the former chief strategy officer of Microsoft, left, started a private equity fund. They pulled me to run one of the companies. I ran one of the companies for 4 years in a private equity setting. The portfolio went public, my company as well. And I thought, hey, I took a company public. Let's go back to what I love. And so, why Bitcoin and why the space? As a kid, I went through capital controls. We emigrated the USSR, the Soviet Union, in '91. I remember I have many stories I'm happy to tell you, but I remember we were allowed 2 suitcases per person to leave. This is your whole life that you're taking with you, and you have 2 suitcases to put it in. And we would do things like they would read your mail. And actually, my mom, my aunt and uncle came over first, and my mom would buy stuffed like plush toys, and she would cut them open, pull the plushing out, stuff it with clothes, and send it abroad with letters like "lots of love inside" or something along those lines. And my aunt had to figure out to open up. She told us later. She was like, "Why am I getting all of these stuffed animals?" And she realized that there are clothes inside. So just to paint a picture of, many times in the U.S., especially in the upper echelons of society, we're very privileged to be able to say, "Oh, we have a stable banking system, and I can just go to a bank and not be discriminated against." In many societies within minorities within the US, for example, but really abroad, people don't have this. And so once I realized that, hey, Bitcoin is an actual store of value, and had we had Bitcoin and we're able to put money into that or stables, you're able to leave with 12 words or 24 words in your mind, go border to border and take your wealth with you. We had capital controls. My grandfather had a silver ruble collection, and I remember we couldn't take that out either. He stuffed it in my pants. I went to the metal detectors. They went off on me, but I was a kid. I was 6 years old, and so they let me through. Back This was pre 9/11, and but we had to go through these hoops: suitcases, stuffed animals. Uh, hiding in on a kid's body because a kid will go through metal detectors and undetected. But these should be real, normal things that a person should be able to walk out with their wealth. And again, so once I jumped into the space, I realized what blockchains could do. And then once you study blockchains, you realize, okay, there's, Bitcoin UTXOs versus Ethereum virtual machines and so on. And you go kind of deep into the space, and it's very hard to look back.
No, that story is awesome, and I think that kind of brings some reverence to why you're so immersed in this space now today. And it's so cool to see your past experiences almost fostering and building you to become immersed into Bitcoin and blockchain technology just due to the geopolitical issues that we have, globally. It's crazy to see that you would have the foresight to know, like, it's almost like the universe was training you for this exact position when you
Yeah.
were 6 years old, you know?
Well, it's interesting. So when I came back into the space, I went to OKX and I did listings at OKX, Okcoin in the US. It was one of the major exchanges. And then when I was looking at my next move post OKX, I'm not a policy person by trade, and the Chamber of Digital Commerce is a policy shop. We essentially lobby and educate politicians uh, and help them arrive at, or I should say, help them stop fumbling the ball more than we're fumbling right now as the US. But I came here because I was looking at a few other companies and a few companies that I loved. There's like Pocket, there's AllTrade, there's some of them are building infrastructure in the space. And I came to the chamber because I just kind of felt a need to go and do the right thing and help stand up a nonprofit organization, you know, put away the upside, put away the options. But I felt this was the right moment to do the right work in the US because there's so many policy headwinds in the US. And for technology that, again, we're very privileged in the US to have a stable banking system. And even that, we're getting inflation takes away a lot of our wealth. And I'm speaking, not to go there, but to go there. I'm speaking as a white male. There are many minorities in the U.S. that are actually outside of the banking system or prejudiced against, and so on. And what Bitcoin allows you to do is to bypass all of that. There's just the UTXO, the 16-digit hash, and that's who you are. And I think it's very powerful to give money and wealth back to the hands of the people. And again, there's this whole non-US part, but for us in the US, I thought this was the right place to do because of my background, because I've experienced it, and I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective on the space versus folks who have just been grown up, thankfully for them, in a system that just supports them being able to have bank accounts and send money and be able to clear with 10 days ACHs, but still be fairly stable and be able to clear money.
Hey there, fellow Bitcoin enthusiasts. We just wanted to take a moment to appreciate you for tuning in to the Bitcoin Source, a Bitcoin conversation. Your support means the world to us as we dive into the exciting world of Bitcoin, blockchain, and all things cryptocurrency. If you've been enjoying our content, don't forget to hit that like button. It's like a virtual high five that keeps us motivated. And hey, sharing is caring. If you know someone who'd geek out over Bitcoin as much as we do, hit that share button. Finally, if you want to stay up to date with all our latest episodes and insights, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss a single update. Thanks for being a part of our community. Keep exploring, and remember, the future is decentralized. Now back to the episode.
Yeah. And, the Chamber of Digital Commerce has been at the forefront of advocating for clearer regulations and standards for the blockchain industry. How does this recent FASB decision align with the Chamber's broader goals?
We've been pushing on FASB to do this for 3 years probably. And so let's just talk about the FASB decision. Before this recent ruling, the accounting for Bitcoin, all crypto, but really on an institutional level, we're talking about Bitcoin, is as a long-lived intangible asset. Basically means that, let's say you buy one Bitcoin at 50 and it falls to 30. Well, you take that hit on the P&L. So now you take a $20,000 hit and now you're recording in your balance sheet at 30. It goes back up to 50, or let's call it 40. You can't write that up. Okay, you cannot write that up. It stays at 30. Well, let's say a new company came in and bought it at 40. They're showing $40,000 in Bitcoin. You're showing only 30 when actually you own the same amount. So not only can you not compare balance sheet to balance sheet, you're also taking P&L hits without being able to true up your P&L, which makes absolutely no sense. It makes sense with an intangible asset. I buy one company. That company accrues value to me. The brand of Coca-Cola has some sort of value, right? If the brand falls in value, it's likely not going to come back up. So I write it down or I amortize it in accounting. It doesn't work in Bitcoin when there's a real market 365 days a year, 24/7. So the new FASB decision was mark to market. You do it in whatever period of time, monthly, quarterly, year, annually, you market to market. It goes up, it goes up, it goes down, it goes down, which makes absolute sense. And even the FASB came out saying this is basically a slam dunk. It eliminates waste, it creates better oversight, creates better transparency, and it's actually the reality of things, of the state of things. So it's a monumental decision, and it's also monumental because it allows, or it removes a barrier for treasuries for corporates to put Bitcoin on their treasury. Otherwise, when you're putting Bitcoin, and look, and I love Bitcoin. I'm 90% in Bitcoin in my portfolio, but some corporates will put Ethereum on there as well. Basically, need a deep liquid pool crypto, which is Bitcoin and Ethereum essentially. But when they were putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet, if you just have to write these things off and you take a P&L hit, you can write all the stuff in the comments and the footnotes of your financials, but very few people know where to dig and how to dig and figure it out. So it's hard to compare across companies. You take a P&L hit, it just disincentivizes adoption. And Michael Saylor, does a really good job of talking about this, about the ETF, about FASB, being two of the main stools for global Bitcoin adoption as a treasury asset, which is essentially where we want Bitcoin to go.
Yes, and I agree with that too. And I think that because the blockchain is so immersed in this timestamp of giving a date and a time, that kind of removes a lot of the vacillation that you see with accounting and having your balance sheet be accrued the right way and knowing exactly when you bought something, when you sold something. It's all locked into a time chain on the blockchain. So I think that it's a win-win for the IRS and for the accounting firms to finally get on board and pay attention to what we've been saying for years and years, like you said, about making this make sense, and now it's finally here. So I'm excited about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Me too. I mean, I hope this, again, the ETF is next. That's the next on the horizon. But if we'll have removed two major barriers here.
Alex, so economic events like the Bitcoin halving usually come with various market sentiments, predictions, and fluctuations. Based on past halvings, have you noticed any patterns or correlations within the overall health and direction of the crypto market?
Look, I'll say this. There's a popular adage in the space that 6 months post a halving, you see Bitcoin starting to move. I should say starting 6 months post a halving. I actually want to go and pressure test that or push back on that. Maybe this is not a popular opinion. I think it just so happened that the halving, the 4-year cycle, overlapped the 4-year business cycle. And it might still be the case. I think it's much more, I think Bitcoin's price appreciation has to do with M2, global liquidity, and M2 has been shrinking. It has to do with what the Fed is doing with interest rates. And it has to do with what cycle we're in. I think it just so happens to, given the geopolitics and so on, that in 24, 25, the Fed will cut it. We're going to go into recession. The Fed will cut interest rates. Hopefully the recession won't be too bad, because it's not just cutting rates. If people don't have money to spend and inflation's fairly high, 4 to 6%, which is where it's likely going to stay, and people just don't have money to spend, they're not buying Bitcoin, they're buying eggs. It's just the case. But corporates are buying Bitcoin, and if the ETF goes through, which reading the tea leaves, I don't know anything that's not public. I'm guessing it's going to happen in Q1. If that happens, then obviously we'll have a lot of money coming into the space for we could talk about why, but various reasons. We also need the global M2 to start growing. And so, again, we'll see what happens with the dollar, but China already is easing. Other countries are easing, especially countries that are at war. And the more we get ourselves into different wars, before it was Russia, Ukraine. I'm biased as a Ukrainian. Now it's Israel, Hamas. I'm also biased as a Jew. But the more wars we get ourselves into, we need to get the money somewhere, and it's literally printing money. Today is the Friday the 13th. I don't know when you'll film it, but yesterday was, I believe yesterday or Wednesday, the 12th or the 11th, was the Treasury auction. And they were selling treasuries at 4.68, and it went up to 4.86 really quickly in terms of the yield on the 10-year. Those are massive jumps in treasuries. So the government is having trouble finding buyers for bonds because people don't believe that the U.S. government the bonds are going to have any value, meaning inflation is going to stay sticky. So look, so I want to decouple that narrative, right? I think it's actually a macro narrative and an M2 narrative. What is true is that there's pressure on the miners. So as part of the chamber, we have an affiliate called the Digital Power Network. We represent most of the major global miners out there: Riot, Marathon, CleanSpark, TeraWolf, Hot 8. We just a bunch of them. Many I'm not naming, but so sorry if I didn't name you, but it's just for the lack of sake of time. Miners have a lot of pressure after the halving because now they're getting one half of the Bitcoin. So essentially, unless you can produce Bitcoin more economically, you have better miners. You're essentially, it's costing you double now, right? To get the same amount of Bitcoin, and that's that always puts pressure on miners. There's always consolidation within the mining space, and that's why scale actually matters for miners. So that is true. That will happen again. We foresee that happening. The Bitcoin appreciation, like I hold Bitcoin, so I'm definitely interested in it mooning and going up. I do think it will, but I think it's more going to be related to the cycles, and it just so macro cycles, and it just so happens to be that they're overlapping with the Bitcoin halving cycles, but not the Bitcoin halving itself driving price appreciation. Yeah, it reduces supply for sure. But if people, again, I just want to say, if people are buying eggs, and they're having trouble buying groceries, they're not buying Bitcoin. So, there's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. As much as we all love Bitcoin and believe in it, you have to feed your family.
And the people that have been stacking or hodling, they might have to end up liquidating some of their stack to buy eggs and feed their
Yeah.
family as well. And Alex, I think that you're one of the few people in this industry that could actually answer this. You know, I really like the approach that you said about kind of decoupling that theory about the halving and with the increasing adoption of Bitcoin, because I think that it's difficult right now, but I also think that with the ETF looming, with Gary Gensler and his decisions and XRP, and like I think things are really changing in the space, and there's been this notable interest in like regulatory clarity, right? How do you view the regulatory landscape, especially given your background in strategy?
Look, it's tough, and at the chamber, we need all the help we can get. There's a lot of uncertainty. Well, first of all, let's back up. SBF did us no favors. In fact, he probably set us back 2-3 years. Before SBF, we had a lot of Democrats on board. Cory Booker, there's the Problem Solvers Caucus, Josh Gottheimer in the House, and so on. Because SBF was so vocal about giving to Democrats, because it was this whole, and then he went and talked about how he was virtue signaling for the woke, agenda, so that he can then, basically play them. A lot of Democrats have shied away. And even the ones that support crypto, and there are enough of them, have shied away. There are a few who haven't. Gillibrand in the Senate, Richie Torres, he's been a huge proponent in the House. He's in New York, and he sees the flight of capital from New York to London and Singapore and Hong Kong and Dubai. And the flight of capital is real. We see this. We're on the front lines. For any policymakers that are seeing this, the flight of capital is astronomical and it's real. And we're just losing jobs in the US in the sector that's going to boom. A lot of the folks that when I was at an exchange, I created a fund called the Bitcoin Odyssey. Incidentally, it was 170 million towards Bitcoin and Stacks. Stacks is the smart contract layer on top of Bitcoin before Rune came out, before Ordinals and so on. In that pledge fund were folks like GSR, White Star Capital, DCG. It's been a little bit, so I'm forgetting some Alumni Ventures, which is a fantastic VC fund of the Ivy League schools, the Harvards and so on. Really, really solid fund. SoftBank was highly interested. It was about to go in, and then the whole market collapsed, and a lot of these guys have completely pulled back. And my whole thesis in 22 was that it's going to be Bitcoin's time to shine. and we should be focused on Bitcoin. And I was right, but I was a year off. Maybe a year and a half, which is tough. But and now we see with ZK rollups on Bitcoin, with runes, with ordinals, we're seeing Bitcoin starting to leave its just property. I'm just a real estate, or I'm just real properties, if you will, and move into a layer that's more than just, before it was Bitcoin, Lightning, and Stacks, more or less, and now it's a lot more. So to go back to your question about policy, it's tough. A lot of Republicans, it went from a nonpartisan issue to a partisan issue. A lot of Republicans are on board. Tom Emmer in the House, who's potentially could be Speaker or the Majority Leader, which is great for us. Patrick McHenry, who can potentially be Speaker, as head of the Financial Services Committee, big proponent. Warren Davidson, many more. Richie Torres on the Democratic side, but mostly Republicans. Democrats are led by Elizabeth Warren, who Gary Gensler is her pawn, and are just pushing back. And look, for Warren, she's a smart woman. She's very astute politically. Being anti-crypto, and her anti-crypto army gets her a lot of engagement, gets her a lot of donations. It just does. And we as an industry are pretty terrible, if I may say, at raising donations to fight back. We've had a couple of donation campaigns, and in fact, if I may do a selfish plug, what I would ask, just for the industry, we put a link to the Chamber's donation page, if you don't mind sharing on your podcast, because we need it. It's essentially digitalchamber.org/donation. We need the help, so we can put money behind politicians, so we can put it into programming. We go around Congress all the time. We have fly-ins every month. We take our members. We've offered every single member of Congress to take money if we give it to them in Bitcoin. Now we've given it to them in Bitcoin. We give them NFT papers. Again, NFTs are, and there are many Bitcoin maxis that don't like them, but I actually think a lot of them will come to Bitcoin. They'll be used as identity of property, or like deeds to houses. You could talk about that as well. But the landscape is tough, but we're fighting the good fight. And we need all the help we can get. And if there's ever a time, right, we're coming into the end of the year here, to give a charitable donation, frankly, to help us. And if whoever your listeners are, you're listening out there, if you care about the space, you want your bags to go up. I'm not saying donations equals bags go up. I have no idea what the price is going to be. I'm definitely not out here shilling price, but I am shilling the fact that the U.S. has to remain a leader in the space. The capital in the U.S. is massive. And once we get clear regulation, and we're doing our damnedest, but if you look at, for example, what's happening in the House, right now there's no speaker. Like, we can't do anything about that. They're not even voting on funding the government, let alone on crypto regulation. So as much as we can run and try, we're also at the whim of some of these macroeconomic wins and macro regulatory government wins. But to bring it back, every little bit helps. $5, $50, $50,000, whatever you want to donate, because it helps us fund the printing, the education, the fly-ins, bringing people to the Hill. Those are very, very, very popular, very effective. We bring in CEOs of companies in front of Congress and say, hey, look, you think this doesn't matter? We had Fred Thiel, the CEO of Marathon, an incredible CEO, one of the most powerful voices in the room when he went in front of Congress, because they could talk to CEO, and he told them, he explained to them about mining, about job creation, and so on. That is very, very powerful for them to hear. And we're not just crypto bros that are out there, trading Doge and, I don't know, Elon Shib Musk rocket ship coin, right? That these are real people with a real business sense that are saying the U.S. is about to fumble the ball. And the last thing I'll say is, look, we represent, there are many trade organizations. We're the only one that are seen as the adults in the room, and we're the only one that represent the major players: BNY Mellon, Wells Fargo, Fidelity, Deloitte, KPMG, E&Y, Aeon, Ava Labs, crypto.com. So we go from crypto native all the way to the big institutions. BNY Mellon and Deloitte and Fidelity, they're no joke. They're not here to kind of mess around. They really see the future in the space, and we have to create sensible regulation for the space to flourish. Regulation isn't bad. Regulation creates clarity in the markets, and then we can all enjoy kind of building in this space.
Yes, and there was a lot to unpack there, and I agree with you. Like when you look at RFK Jr. going from the Democratic Party to independent, and I think that is very telling about how you said FBF kind of ruined it for the Democratic Party as far as pushing the narrative that Bitcoin and blockchain technology is here to stay. And I think a lot of politicians and people in power are kind of ignorant towards Bitcoin or Ethereum, and they're more knowledgeable about the potential of what blockchain technology can do. Having been deeply involved in shaping Microsoft's, blockchain strategy, where do you see the most transformative applications of blockchain beyond cryptocurrencies going?
That's a hard question. I fundamentally believe in the world of public chains. I believe in open source. I believe in distributed nodes, distributed consensus systems. I don't believe in just a Bitcoin only world, but I do believe in a Bitcoin mostly world in terms of Bitcoin has its space, as a future store of value, as kind of real property. And then there's everything else. And I very firmly believe, and I went to business school to build renewable energy power plants. I believe in climate change. I very firmly believe that Bitcoin is going to improve our work, will incentivize renewable builds. And it's an easy thing to believe because it just so happens to be true. And you can see it in the data. The other chains will have their uses. Some are faster. Some have more throughput. Some you can power cycle and restart. But fundamentally, you need the crypto token to reward and incentivize the participation in securing the network. Okay, those are public chains. Now, there's a lot of talk of private chains, and this happens, call it cross-government agencies, where you can create a private blockchain and you have X nodes of the State Department or State Treasury and so on. Just think about it. Within different departments, you have a lot of different nodes. Those nodes all talk to each other. You have, whatever. 15 out of 20 agree, then the transaction is put into the chain. That's a world that exists, and that's a world that will exist, and it just streamlines some of their operations in terms of securing data. I'm kind of being a little bit purposeful and slow as I'm describing this because I don't fully believe in the value prop of that world, but I do see, like as Microsoft, enterprises have a lot of different tech stacks, and it's very hard to just rip out and replace tech stacks and put them on the cloud. And even cloud providers have single faults, theoretically. Although, look, I'm a big fan of Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and everything that these guys do. Microsoft, we had the people that wrote the book. We literally had the people that wrote the book on on encryption. The guys with the old dudes, long beards, ripped t-shirts in Seattle. They literally wrote the book, about encryption. So you have those players, but you can still have a world of private chains, I guess. So you don't have to rip and replace your stacks, but you can create a seamless way of storing data and creating immutability in data. Having said that, I do believe most of our applications will be on public chains, which necessarily need a token to reward consensus building.
Which one's the best crypto asset? Well, Bitcoin is the best crypto asset. Okay, what's the second best? There is no second best. There's no second best crypto asset. There's a crypto asset. It's called Bitcoin, right? Right? There's no second best, okay? But take all your money, buy Bitcoin, then take all your time, figure out how to borrow more money to buy more Bitcoin, then take all your time and figure out what you can sell to buy Bitcoin. And if you absolutely love the thing that you don't want to sell it, Go mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin with it. And if you've got a business that you love because your family works for the business that's in your family for 37 years and you can't bear to sell it, mortgage it, finance it, and convert the proceeds into the hardest money on earth, which is Bitcoin.
This channel is for education purposes only and is not affiliated with any financial institution. This is not financial advice. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now back to the episode.
I think that that is going to be instrumental to pushing this industry forward in the next few years. And there was something, Alex, that I really wanted to pick your brain on. The CFTC has a history of principle-based regulation, and I know that the digital commerce sector is really working hard towards working with places or entities like the CFTC. Can you explain what that means and why it's significant for the blockchain industry?
I think the biggest thing with the SEC and the CFTC is the whole discussion of commodity versus security. SEC thinks everything is a security, other than Bitcoin, and I guess now technically other than Ripple, based on the judgment on the judge's case, Judge Torres, which she ruled. And the CFTC says, look, you can have apples, and then you can have a contract on top of apples that I will pay you X amount of dollars for 50 apples to be delivered later. That's a security. Futures contract. Most of the tokens in the space, I shouldn't say that, but tokens like Bitcoin in the space typically are commodities. And so an approach of principles-based regulation, the CFTC has typically been more open to being pragmatic with crypto, to being pragmatic with the way it approaches crypto. And the folks that we speak with over there are like, they have a can-do world of the possible attitude. They're trying to figure out, okay, we have this, what can this look like? What can we do with this? What do we think about the traveler rule, for example? It's very different than the SEC, especially given the current under Gensler. So the CFTC is just much more pragmatic, and then the more we can create clarity between what a security is, what a commodity is, the better and the more streamlined of a framework for building an all crypto we're going to have. And maybe it's a truism, but what we need, essentially, what we're fighting for, is to say these things are commodity, CFTC oversees it. Or if you sell it in such a way, these things are securities, SEC oversees them. But typically, the CFTC has been just, more principled, more pragmatic, more open, more willing to listen to ideas, more willing to create a framework that promotes growth versus a framework that vilifies an industry for political reasons. And unfortunately, the SEC has done that.
And finally, reflecting on your diverse career, what would you say has been the most rewarding aspect of working in the digital assets realm and blockchain industry, and where do you see the industry heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think the most rewarding is I've never seen an industry that innovates and moves at this pace. And it's the most rewarding and the most exhausting. I mean, how long have you been in the space?
I've been in the space since 2017.
Okay, so you, and I remember the last run, I remember being on crypto Twitter, and I was part of an exchange, and we were like, I can't wait to the bear market so we can sleep. It's an insane pace of change. And it's exciting. It's exciting to be a part of something that changes so fast, that innovates so fast, that moves so fast, where you have a lot of smart people coming in. And there are many times where I can look back on the space and I think, this is probably what it was like in 95 being a Microsoft or Apple, just sitting around and figuring out what are we going to build and how we're going to build it and change the world. That's exciting. That's amazing. Last 2 years have been tough, very tough. Specifically because of regulation, specifically because of various self-serving political, and again, this is not a policy issue. If Elizabeth Warren wanted to have a good policy, especially against the banks who she's said she's always against, I'm not even saying crypto needs to take down the banks. The banks serve a necessary role here. Custody, for example. The average Joe grandpa or Jane grandma is not going to go and self-host in a Trezor wallet. She's going to go to her JP Morgan and she's going to say, hey guys, can you custody my crypto? Can you help me buy and sell? So everyone has a role. But my point with Warren is that she's fought her whole life for financial, she talks about financial inclusiveness, right? And these big bad companies coming after the little man. It's like, this is your solution. This is a solution to giving financial literacy and education to many people, especially the underserved in this country, the minorities in this country. By the way, if you look at all the polls, minorities disproportionately are using crypto versus, call it white male, white female, middle to upper class in the US. So it's like there's a reason why, right? So the regulation has been kind of killing that spirit. And it's tough because the headwinds are extremely strong. We're going to fight them, and they're starting to die down because they're starting to get exhausted. But they were still strong for the last 2 years, very, very strong. And again, at the chamber, that's why I keep on plugging the donations. We felt it as well, right? Everyone has felt the bear market. But back to the positive, the exciting part is just the building and the incredible amount of talent. And what do I see in 5 to 10 years? I definitely see a Bitcoin ETF. I see Bitcoin putting on treasuries. But outside of just holding a financial asset, I hope to see a cross-border payment system, something that like Jack Mallers is doing with Strike, what the block is building, what a lot of other what MetaMask is doing. MetaMask now accepts Bitcoin. So just cross-border payments, cross-border wallets, getting away from the narrative of, on the miner side, with ESG, having Bitcoin truly be used in grid stabilization in the more developed countries, and in a new export of natural resources in developing countries. Because like Salvador, we talked about the volcano, putting up Bitcoin miners next to the volcano. Well, they couldn't harness a volcano before. So because you have to build a road, very expensive. Bring transmission lines back, very expensive. You put a Bitcoin miner there, theoretically, although that, for our space, it's also been a little bit like whitewashed, and we can talk about energy if we want, or maybe in the next episode. But it's not that easy to actually harness geothermal. I have an energy background from the ground, but theoretically, wind is easy. You have wind in the middle of nowhere, typically now by cities. You can harness that. It's a natural resource. And now Bitcoin gives you a channel and a way to export it where you weren't able to do it before. So Bitcoin being part of the infrastructure of countries on the financial side and on the energy security side. And look, energy security, and by the way, incentivizing nuclear builds, because energy security and nuclear are absolutely crucial for national security, for countries' national security. And yeah, and look, I'm rooting hard for Salvador, for their bonds that are convertible to Bitcoin, for them to actually work out, because it'll show other small countries that you can finance yourself with some sort of Bitcoin derivative or Bitcoin contract that is better than taking money from the World Bank or IMF. Again, those entities have a role to play, but they also come at a very high cost for many countries. And then they enable countries to be dependent on them. And so there's an alternative, I believe, in open competition. If now they have to compete, maybe their products are going to be better. Right? Maybe their service levels are going to be better. Maybe the hundreds, thousands of PhD economists they have there can step up their game, and that's going to be better for everyone. So I see Bitcoin fundamentally playing a role. I think Ethereum stays. I think we see, a couple more L1s and a lot of layer 2s and roll-ups, and it becomes, different chains. It's a multi-chain world. Bitcoin institutional, identity, DeFi, I think. Something like Ethereum, consumer-based DeFi, Solana, maybe a completely consumer chain. I don't know who's going to win. I do know that there's a clear institutional use case for Bitcoin, and probably Ethereum, and the rest is creative destruction and creative entropy, if you will. Something will blossom. We don't know what, but things aren't taking over Bitcoin. Bitcoin is in a class of itself. That has to be said, and that has to be true for anyone that understands the space. They get it. There's Bitcoin, and there's everything else.
Alex, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Your deep insight and extensive experience provide a unique lens through which we can view the exciting world of Bitcoin and blockchain. For our listeners, thank you for joining us, and be sure to stay tuned for more Bitcoin Source episodes. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.